Hungarian Folk Tales. The Silken Meadow. Once upon a time, there lived a great king, and the king had a gallant, handsome son. But alas, the king was always sad. One day his son decided to ask him why he was always so sad, and his father, the king, replied, "I see, my son, that you are a valiant man of courage and skill, for you triumph over the finest swordsmen, and you fell the most ferocious beasts. But I can find no joy in this, for I have a close friend from whom 6 months ago I received a message. There is a beautiful silken meadow in the middle of the golden forest. My friend lives there." But the witches were so envious of his wondrous lands that they sent their minions to descend on him in their thousands. He has begged me to come to his aid, but as you see, I am old and I cannot go. "Dear father, then I will go. I will wander the forest until I find your friend." "Good, my son. May the Lord go with you. But listen closely to me. Behind the stables there is a large pit full of mud. There you will find the horse I rode in my youth. I urge you to take him as your mount. But first you must feed him. In the garden you will find 12 bundles of wood. Set them all aflame, and when they have burnt to cinders, take the horse from the pit and feed him, for he eats nothing but smouldering coals." So he set the wood aflame, and when it had burnt to cinders, the prince took the horse from the mud pit and dragged him to the burning coals. Then the horse began to eat and grew visibly stronger and more vigorous. When he had finished, his coat glistened. The prince stood gaping in wonder, for he had noticed that the horse had 6 legs. His father spoke, "Now, dear son, go up to the attic. There you will find shimmering swords, but among them you will see one covered with rust. Take it as yours." So the prince went up to the attic and brought down the rusty sword. He tried to draw it from its scabbard, but he was unable. "No, son, that is not how you draw this sword. You tell it, 'Sword, come forth from your scabbard.'" Hardly had the prince uttered these words and the sword flew from the scabbard, slicing the air with a swoosh. "Now tell it, 'Sword, come back to your scabbard.'" Hardly had the prince uttered these words and the sword was already back in its scabbard. Father and son embraced. Both shedding tears, they bid farewell. The prince mounted the 6-legged horse, and the horse flew into the air, straight as an arrow. Then the horse slowed and began to descend into a beautiful forest filled with trees of gold. There the prince set off on foot. Soon he saw the edge of the silken meadow, and in the middle of the meadow, a tent. And when he reached the tent, he saw a grey-haired man sleeping on a bed. In one of the corners of the tent there hung a curtain. Pulling the curtain aside, he saw a beautiful gold bed, and in it lay a maiden with golden hair and a golden dress. One of her legs and one of her arms were hanging off the side of the bed, and the prince stepped over to her, took her leg in his hand, and placed it gently back on the bed. The maiden was not asleep, but she watched him out of the corner of one eye. When the prince took her hand to place it on the bed, the maiden wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. "Let us be man and wife and live together forevermore. I know you are tired, so step back to the middle of the tent and sleep." The prince did as she asked and immediately fell into a deep slumber. As the prince fell asleep, the old man awoke and saw that there was a stranger in the tent. He drew his sword to fell the strange man, and as he was about to strike, it occurred to him to wonder, "This man also has a sword. I myself was asleep when he entered. He could have slain me. I will not do him any harm." And when the young prince awoke from his slumber, the old man spoke, "Boy, who are you, and what do you seek here? Unless I am mistaken, it is you that I seek. My father sent me to come to your aid. You are the son of my dear friend the Red King? I am. It is good that you have come, for the witch's minions have been besieging me now for well over a year. And I see you have brought your father's sword, the companion to mine. For you should know, young prince, that no matter how many witches I slay with mine, 10,000 more come in their place. Do you see that huge mountain? An old witch lives in a cavern in the mountainside, and she sends her minions in droves to attack me. Until we slay her, I will have no peace. They rose early the next day, and as the sun rose, the witch's minions came in droves. And they poured down the mountainside like lava from a hot volcano. Then they drew their swords and slashed them to pieces. The Red Prince set off for the mountain. His sword sliced through the witches like a knife through warm butter. When they reached the hole in the mountainside, he decided to go in and see what lay inside. And what do you think he saw? In the middle of a huge cavern, a loom, and at the loom, an old woman whose nose was so long and so crooked, it reached the ground. And the old witch pedalled so hard that every time she lifted the shuttle, 100 of her minions sprang forth, ordered them to attack the aged man. Go forth to the Silken Meadow, kill the old man. The prince leapt to the witch's side, took the dagger from his belt and thrust it into her heart. And what happened then? The huge mountain crumbled into dust and was scattered by the winds. In the space of a moment, it was as if it had never even been there. And what was there in its place? A beautiful silken meadow. The old man called his daughter forth and spoke, "Good prince, I have no other child, only this one daughter. If you love her, I shall give you her hand in marriage, and with it, my entire kingdom." So the priest came, and the prince and the maiden were married in the Silken Meadow, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Sebastian, the Dragon Slayer. Once upon a time, there was a poor man. And the poor man had 3 sons. They were so poor that they could not afford to buy even the smallest morsel of food. So they decided to go and see the king and tell him of their misfortune. As they were ambling and rambling along their way, they saw an old shepherd grazing sheep on the hill. The eldest son said, "Ah, if these sheep were mine, I would give one to every poor man." The old shepherd replied, "Then from this moment on, you shall be the shepherd here, and the sheep shall be yours." The 2 other youths continued on their journey, and the old man went with them too. They reached a field of hawthorn. The second son said, "If only there were vines in this field and not hawthorn, and if only the vines were mine, I would give a vine of plump grapes to every poor man." "Then let the field be yours," said the old shepherd. "And instead of a field of hawthorn, let it be a vineyard." And the second son stayed to tend the vines. The third son continued on his journey with the old shepherd by his side, and soon they arrived at the banks of a broad river. The young man said, "If only I were the ferryman here, I would take everyone to the far banks and ask not even for a penny. So the old shepherd agreed and continued on his way home alone. He ambled and rambled along, and soon his path took him winding back to where the first youth stood. "You have so many fine sheep, my son," said the old man. "Would you give me one?" "If I gave one of my sheep to everyone who happened by, in the end I would not have a single sheep to my name." The old man gave a wave of his hand, and suddenly the hill turned to stone. Then he continued on his way to meet the second son. "What a lovely vineyard you have, dear boy. You could give me a vine or two." "I will not give you a vine, not even a cluster of withered grapes." And before he could so much as cast a glance at his vines, the entire vineyard turned into a field of prickly hawthorn. The moon was high in the sky by the time the old shepherd reached the river, where he found the youngest son. He called out to the other side of the river, Come across the waters on the ferry." The wife of the ferryman was heavy with child, so the old man had to wait a while, but the youngest brother soon crossed the waters on the ferry. He did not ask as much as a single penny from the old man. Meanwhile, the baby was born, and they asked the old shepherd to be the godfather. By the time the baby had grown to be a boy of 7 years old, he already seemed to be a lad of 20. The old man said to him, "Now, Sebastian," for this was his name, "I will give you a sword. If you tell this sword, 'Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword, slice his head in two,' and it will slice the head from the neck of any foe." The boy thanked the old man. "And now," said the old man, "go to see the king of the nearby lands, for they need as many shepherds there as there are days in the year. But do not ask a high wage, no more than 12 gold coins, a saddle and a horse. Play on the pipes and drive the flock into the rosemary forest, and fear nothing." So he went to see the king of the nearby lands. "Your Majesty, do you have need of a shepherd in your kingdom?" "Indeed I do," said the king, and he took the boy into his service. "Take the flocks out to graze and play the pipes as you watch over them, but do not go over the bridge, for if you do, you will surely meet your death." Sebastian took the flocks out to graze, playing on the pipes. The king watched him from the window. The boy was deep in a rosemary forest. He took off his cloak and spread it out at his feet. Then he took out his pipes and played on them. There was a stream nearby, and as the water rushed and gushed, suddenly a 7-headed dragon emerged from the water. "And pray tell, what stray winds have brought you here? Do you seek the unhappy fate of the other shepherds who came here before you?" Sebastian took his sword in hand and asked the dragon calmly, "Why, what fate befell them?" "Why, if you are so bold to ask, I will show you," roared the dragon, and he charged at the boy. Sebastian lifted the sword above his head and cried out, "Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword, slice his head in two," and each of the 7 heads of the dragon fell with a thud to the ground. The next day, when Sebastian was eating his breakfast, a 9-headed dragon emerged from the waters of the stream, but it fared no better than the 7-headed dragon before it. The king could not fathom what had happened, for until this Sebastian had come along, he had lost a shepherd every day of the year. "I will pay it little mind," thought the king. "We will wait and see what the fates have in store." Again Sebastian took the flocks out to graze, and he stopped to have a drink from the stream, when suddenly a 12-headed dragon emerged from the waters. "How dare you come to this place?" Sebastian drew his sword. "Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword, slice his head in two." When the dragon had but a single head remaining on its shoulders, he begged for mercy. "Oh, Sebastian, Sebastian the dragon slayer, please leave me with this one head, and I swear I will serve you." So Sebastian let the dragon keep the last of its 12 heads. Under the bridge there was an enormous cave, and the dragon took Sebastian to its mouth. Sebastian had never seen anything like it before. It was an empire bigger than the realm of the king. There Sebastian found the sheep and the shepherds that had been stolen by the dragons. "Come with me to see the king," said Sebastian. And with that, he sliced the dragon's last head off. When he returned to the castle, the king soon realized he was a man of great courage and strength. he gave Sebastian his daughter's hand in marriage, and with it, half of his realm. "I accept your daughter's hand in marriage," said Sebastian, "but your lands you may keep, for I am a lord of a kingdom even finer than yours." They celebrated their wedding that very day, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Man with the Heart of Stone. Once upon a time, in a distant land beyond the hills, there lived a poor old woman who had 3 handsome sons. One day the young men decided to set out in search of maidens from other lands to take as wives, for in their village they found not a single one to their liking. And as they ambled and rambled, their path took them through a vast forest, where they saw a small cottage and went inside. "Blessings of the Lord on you, old man," said the youths. "Would you give us lodging for the night?" "I will gladly give you lodging." So the young men stayed for the night, and in the morning the old man said, "Good men, your path has brought you to me, and when you return, it will bring you to my home again. I gave you shelter, and in return I ask that you bring me a beautiful maiden whom I can take to be my wife." The 3 young men thought, "A young maiden for this old man? The greybeard can barely hobble along." But they kept these thoughts to themselves and tried to hide their laughter. The 3 youths travelled to distant lands as they had planned and entered into the service of the king. The king had 3 beautiful, strong daughters. The youths served so well and fought so bravely that the king grew fond of them. So he gave them his daughters to be their wives. With great joy, the youths brought their wives home, but on their way, they had to cross through the vast forest where the old man lived. When they came to his cottage, they greeted him. "Blessings of the Lord on you, old man. Blessings of the Lord on you. You were gone for a long time. I see you have found yourselves lovely wives. But where, pray tell, is my maiden to wed?" The young men said, "We did not bring you a maiden to wed." "You did not bring me a maiden to wed? Then I will turn you all to stone, and only one maiden will remain to be my wife." And as he spoke, the young man and the 2 girls turned to stone. One maiden remained, whom he kept by his side. She swept, cooked, and cried all day. One day the old man was in very high spirits. The maiden said to him, "Kind old man, why did you turn them to stone?" "Because my heart is made of stone too." "And where is your stone heart?" "It is there, between the bed sheets." The old man left the cottage and went wandering in the forest. The maiden picked dozens of flowers and wove a beautiful garland, which she placed on the bed. In the evening, when the old man returned, he began to laugh and cackle. "Why did you put that garland on the sheets?" "Because I wanted your stone heart to know joy, so I made a lovely garland." The old man laughed heartily. "I can see you are a kind-hearted girl. You thought my stone heart was in the bed sheets, did you not? Ah, but it is not." "Then tell me where it is, kind old man," the maiden pleaded. "Listen closely. In the middle of the vast forest, there is a huge rock, and in the rock there is a little bird, and my heart is in that little bird. If someone smashes the rock, catches the bird, and takes from it my heart, then I will have my heart again." The girl sank into thought. "Oh Lord, what man can do that?" Many years passed, and the poor old woman was still waiting for her 3 sons to return home. She thought surely they had died, and another son was born to her, and he grew up to a boy 12 years of age. "Dear mother," he said one day, "do I have neither brothers nor sisters?" With great sorrow in her voice, the old woman told him that he had had 3 brothers, and they had travelled to distant lands in search of maidens to marry, but they had never returned. "Well," he said, "prepare me for the trip, and I will set out to find them." The poor woman gave her youngest son food for the trip, and, weeping bitter tears, she bid him farewell. He set out on his way, and after he had travelled far, he sat down to eat and said, "Anyone who is hungry, come join me." Suddenly a ram with tremendous horns on its head came out from the forest. "You summoned me, young man. I am here." The young man treated the ram to a feast. And when they had eaten their fill, the ram said, "Take a hare of mine, and should you find yourself in danger, I will come to your aid." The young man continued on his way and eventually sat down to eat once more and said, "Is there anyone here? For I have a little food left." And a dove alighted on his shoulder. "Come and eat with me. Take a feather of mine, and should you find yourself in danger, I will come to your aid." The young man continued on his way, and he eventually found himself at the cottage where the stone-hearted man lived. So he knocked on the door, but the man wasn't at home, only his wife. "Good evening, and what brings you to this distant place, young man?" The young man replied, "I set out to see distant lands, and you? Do you live alone in this little cottage?" "I am not alone," replied the maiden. "An old man lives here too, but now he's wandering in the forest." And then the maiden spoke of her grief, of the men and the maidens turned to stone statues, and she also spoke of how the old man could get his heart back. The young man set out to find the great rock, and when he came upon it, he sighed, "If only that battering ram were here, he would smash this rock for me." And magically the ram appeared and butted the rock once, twice with his tremendous horns and smashed it to pieces. "Now all I need is the dove to catch the little bird," he sighed, and magically the dove alighted again on his shoulder, and there and then it caught the little bird. The youth took it in his hand and returned to the cottage, and as he approached, the old man said to the maiden, "Oh, my dear girl, I do not know what is happening to me, but I feel great warmth, and my chest seems to beat again." And as the youth drew close to the cottage, the old man began to shed tears. "Old man, I bring you back your heart." The old man put the heart of the little bird where his heart once had been, and it beat again as it had beaten before. Then the maiden spoke, "Now, old man, bring those statues back to life. Let them know joy again." The old man brought them back to life. They paid him thanks, embraced one another, and set off, homeward bound. They celebrated with a huge wedding feast, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. A talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 beautiful daughters. He was leaving for market one day when he asked his daughters, "Tell me, what would you like me to bring you from the market?" The eldest replied, "Dear father, bring me a golden dress." The second daughter replied, "Bring me a silver dress." "And what shall I bring for you?" the king asked his youngest daughter. "Dear father, bring me a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." The king shook his head. "If such things are to be found in this world, I will bring them to you, daughter dear." The king went to the market, where he quickly found and purchased a golden dress for his eldest daughter, a silver dress for his middle daughter, but he simply could not find a talking vine, a smiling apple, or a jingling, tingling peach. The king was downcast. It saddened him that he was unable to fulfill his most beloved daughter's wish. While he was brooding, his coach gave a sudden jolt and got stuck so deep in the mud that the horses could not pull it free. The king was furious because his trusty horses could race more quickly than the stars across the night sky. He sent to the village for help, and when news spread that the king's coach was stuck in the mud, men, women, and even small children came to lend a hand. To their shame, no one could push the king's coach free. All of a sudden, a pig appeared. "Oink, grunt, oink, your highness, give me your youngest daughter's hand, and I will free you, your horses, your coach, and everything." The king stood and stared in amazement, but whatever the king thought, he simply replied, "We will shake on it, a king's hand and a pig's trotter. If you free me, I will give you my youngest daughter's hand." The pig didn't wait, didn't hesitate. He wedged his snout under the wheels, gave a shove, and pushed the coach from the mud. The horses took off at a gallop, and the king was back in his castle in a flash. And when he got home, he gave his eldest daughter the golden dress and his middle daughter the silver dress. But with great sadness, he said to his youngest daughter, "My dear girl, my darling daughter, why didn't you ask for a dress too? For I failed to find a vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." But hardly had he finished when he heard a gruff grunting outside. He looked out of the window and saw that the pig had even brought his wheelbarrow. "Oink, grunt, oink, I've come for your daughter. Let her come down and I'll carry her off in my wheelbarrow." "Stop there," thought the king. "I'll send you a maiden." A peasant girl was quickly found, robed in the beautiful golden dress, and sent out to meet the pig. But the pig was no fool. He said to the king, "Oink, grunt, oink, this is not your daughter." The king began to regret that he had ever given his word to a filthy swine. And the princess? She sobbed and moaned so terribly that the whole palace shook. The king, shedding bitter tears of grief, told her, "My dear daughter, I have promised you to the pig, so you must go." Then the king had an idea. He dressed his youngest daughter in dirty rags and sent her out to meet the pig. The pig, when he saw the princess, was beside himself with joy. He grabbed the girl, placed her in the wheelbarrow, and carried her off, grunting and oinking all the way. "Oink, grunt, oink. Don't cry, princess. You'll be happy with me. We'll soon be home." But the daughter only really began to sob when the pig came to a stop in front of a large sty, took her inside and sat her down on dirty straw. "Oink, grunt, oink. This is my home," said the pig, and he offered her some corn. "Oink, grunt, oink. Have a bite to eat, princess." But the princess simply sobbed and moaned. She cried and cried until she eventually fell into a deep, deep slumber. The princess slept and slept, and she didn't wake until noon the next day. As the noon bell rang, she opened her eyes and, wonder of wonders, she was dazzled by a blinding light. She had lain down in a pigsty, and now, lo and behold, she awoke in a palace. A host of maids hurried to her bedside. They brought her sumptuous robes and dressed her beautifully. Then they took her into the neighbouring room, where a handsome youth sat at a table laden with food. He said to her, "Take a seat." Everything you see is yours. I too am yours, if you will have me. Who are you? What are you? The girl asked. I will tell you in good time. Come now to the garden. He took her arm, and they went into the garden. In the garden, a fine vine leaned towards the maid, and the clusters of grapes spoke. Pick us from the vine, princess. They walked on, and soon she espied an apple tree, the little red apples on its boughs smiling beautifully. And as you see, we have smiling apples too, said the youth. They walked a little more. What is jingling and tingling so sweetly? The princess asked. Jingling, tingling peaches as you wished. Now will you stay and be my wife? The princess wrapped the youth in her arms. Yes, I will stay and be your loving wife for the rest of my life. But the youth then told her how he had once been a king, but a cruel witch had changed him into a lowly swine and put a curse on him. He would remain a pig until he found a maid who had wished for a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. They sent word out that very day, inviting every member of his kingdom to the wedding. Their fabulous feast was indeed a wondrous sight to see, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. King Matthias and the Lamb with the Golden Fleece. The King of Prussia went to see King Matthias. They greeted each other as old friends, and the King of Prussia said, I heard that you have a lamb with a golden fleece. It is true, among the many sheep in my flocks, I have a lamb with a golden fleece, and I have a shepherd who never tells a lie. To this the King of Prussia replied, I will prove to you that you are wrong, for your shepherd does not always speak the truth. This I will not believe, said King Matthias, for my shepherd never lies. I will prove to you that he does, for I will trick him, so that he must. To this King Matthias replied, I am so certain of his honesty that I will give you half my kingdom if he lies. The King of Prussia replied, and I will give you half of mine if he does not. So they shook hands and bid each other good night, and the King of Prussia returned to his inn. There he changed his clothes into peasant's rags and went to work in the fields. Meekly he greeted the shepherd, and the shepherd replied, Welcome, the Lord's blessing be on you, my king. How do you know I am a king? The shepherd replied, I know from your words you are a king. To this the King of Prussia replied, I will shower you in golden coins. I will give you 6 horses and the finest carriage if you give me the lamb with the golden fleece. Oh, I could not do that, not for all the gold in the world, for King Matthias would have me hanged. The King of Prussia promised him riches and jewels, but the shepherd did not give in. The King of Prussia returned to his inn, hanging his head in sorrow. His daughter saw this and said, "Do not be sad, father. I will go myself, and I will take a coffer of gold coins and trick him myself." So the king's daughter took a coffer full of gold and a bottle of sweet wine with which to trick the shepherd. But the shepherd only answered that he had no need of money, and King Matthias would surely hang him if he lost the lamb with the golden fleece. But the girl persisted, and soon they had drunk the wine, though she had had to have the first sip to prove to him that she had not poisoned the wine. The shepherd was soon in such high spirits that he said he would give her the lamb with the golden fleece if she would spend the night with him. But he had no need of riches or gold, for he had riches enough. The girl did not hesitate, and she agreed to lie down with the shepherd. Then she said to him, "Skin the lamb and eat its meat, for I have no need of it. I need only its fleece." Brimming with joy, the girl took the fleece back to her home. Her father was overjoyed that his daughter had managed to trick the shepherd. But morning came, and the shepherd was very sad, for he did not know what to say to his king. And as he walked, he stuck his crook in a hole in the ground, hung his hat on its end, stepped back, and greeted it as if it were the king. The king, or rather the shepherd's hat, asked, "What news do you bring me from the fields?" To this the shepherd replied, "No news at all, except that the lamb with the golden fleece is gone, for it was eaten by a wolf." And the shepherd shook with fear. "You lie, for the wolf would have eaten the rest of the flock as well." The shepherd took his crook under his arm and set off again towards the castle. He ambled and rambled along, and he soon came across another hole in the ground, where he stuck his crook in the hole and hung his hat on the end and greeted the figure of the king. "What news do you bring me from the fields?" "No news at all, except that the lamb with the golden fleece stumbled into the well and drowned." "You lie," said the king, "for the others would have drowned too." So the shepherd carried on until he found a third hole in the ground, where he stuck his crook in the hole and hung his hat on the other end, and for the third time he greeted the figure of the king. "What news do you bring me from the fields?" "No news at all, except that the lamb with the golden fleece has been stolen." "You lie," said the king, "for the others would have been stolen too." So for the third time he took his crook from the ground and continued on his way to the castle of King Matthias. In the castle the king was seated at the table together with the King of Prussia and his daughter. The shepherd humbly approached and greeted the two kings and the girl. But the King of Prussia had already given King Matthias the fleece of the golden lamb, and now all three were waiting to see if the shepherd would lie or tell the truth. For if he lied, King Matthias would lose half his kingdom. King Matthias asked, "What news do you bring me from the fields?" "No news at all, except that I exchanged the lamb with the golden fleece for a beautiful black sheep." King Matthias was overjoyed, but he replied, "Bring this black sheep to me." But the shepherd answered, "She is sitting right there between the two kings." "Well done," said King Matthias, "for you have told no lies, and today I give you half of the lands belonging to the King of Prussia. And I shall give you my daughter's hand in marriage," said the King of Prussia, "for you already know the taste of each other's lips." And this is how King Matthias Shepherd rose to become the King of Prussia.